There aren't many game directors who have become public figures outside of the games community sort of bubble. It's really easy to forget that if you're like deep into video game community stuff, but vast majority of gamers are very casual. They don't really pay attention to games commentary and don't know names that seem very basic to you and me, like Shigeru Miyamoto or Todd Howard or Miyazaki or John Carmack or Gabe Newell. Their favorite game director is mostly Tony Hawk.
I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, have we met?
No, I've seen you somewhere before. I don't know.
Oh right, yeah, I get that a lot. Tony Hawk?
Are you?
No.
What, if you were, then you wouldn't be working here.
Yeah, exactly.
And that sort of creator obscurity is by design in the games industry, which is why I think Hideo Kojima is such an interesting case study. A lot of the most impactful game directors in history aren't really on social media, and thus we just don't have access to them. But to paint a picture using a very boring metric, John Romero, co-creator of Doom, has 40,000 followers on Instagram. Neil Druckmann, the co-creator of The Last of Us, has 370,000. Sam Lake, the face of Max Payne and co-director of Alan Wake 2, has 134,000. Hideo Kojima has 4 million. Also, sometimes he likes pictures of my dog on Instagram, which I think is the biggest flex of my life. Anyway, really, there are a number of reasons that Kojima has stood out amongst the crowd insofar as video game, like, auteur is concerned. But it isn't like other people haven't tried to do this. It's also not even because his games are good. Lots of games are good. Lots of games sell far, far more copies than Death Stranding have, but lots of game developers are not Hideo Kojima. Do you know that back when EA, Electronic Arts, was founded, they were considered to be like punk rock? I know. They were like edgy and cool and did piracy and not whatever the hell has to happen to accompany capitalism that leads to this genuinely disgusting graph from Stephen Totilo at GameFile. Here's how much money EA CEO Andrew Wilson makes in comparison to the average EA employee. Yeah, guess we should lay off some more game developers, I guess. How else could we fix the problem in the games industry if not laying off the game developers at the bottom line there? There's just no money to spare anywhere else. That's crazy. Now, I promise this video is actually about Kojima, but first, EA was founded by former Apple employee Trip Hawkins, a very significant figure in video games by all accounts, but a name probably not that many of you know, which is crazy, considering his name's fucking Trip Hawkins. Hawkins had this whole thing about wanting to treat software as an art form, and so called developers software artists, which admittedly does sound like what a startup calls underpaid programmers right before laying them off, but he technically didn't do that part. They actually packaged their games to look like album covers at the time. EA gave developers photo credits, including a full-page magazine's ad, a lot of which you can still see on the walls if you go and visit EA's campus in Northern California. And the company was actually known for sharing its profit with its artists. They were actually the first company to ever put out an ad that featured software designers in it, and really it's because Hawkins specifically valued the art component of what they were trying to make. Art, it turns out, is made by people. Basically, Trip Hawkins walked at a reasonable, respectable pace so that Andrew Wilson could run him over with a fighter jet. A small set of others followed suit. Sierra Online, founded by Roberta and Ken Williams, also used Roberta pretty heavily in marketing, including in ads. Lucasfilm did the same thing. Then they all kind of stopped somewhere around the early 1990s for a myriad of reasons that Hideo Kojima has uniquely been able to subvert. It's time to hear from today's sponsor, Aura. Have you ever wondered how your email address even gets found by all those companies that fill up your inbox with annoying spam? Or how you get flooded with scam phone calls despite the fact that you aren't exactly handing out your phone number? I can't believe those companies that keep texting me and saying that they've seen my profile on LinkedIn and want to offer me a stay-at-home job that pays $8,000 a month aren't real. But they aren't. And they're finding me and you through data brokers. Hi, Banjo. He hates data brokers. Data brokers are companies that sell your data to marketers and scammers. It's so gross. Like, genuinely, even companies that you might trust are sometimes doing this to you, and there's just something so violating about it. That's where Aura comes in. You know those companies are legally required to remove your info if you ask them? Yeah, that's why they make it so incredibly hard and confusing. They know you're allowed to ask. Go ahead. Ask. They also know most people will give up because they make it so hard. Aura takes care of that for you. They'll remove your info from data broker websites and make sure it stays off. They act as an all-in-one digital security that'll alert you if your personal info is found on the dark web, give real-time fraud alerts for credit credit and banking, plus 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure. If that wasn't enough, somehow, Aura also includes $5 million in identity theft insurance. That's why I chose Aura, and you can too. Try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/CharlesAnazard. And in that 14 days, that 2 weeks, you'll actually have enough time to find out where your data is being exposed and sold. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and you shouldn't either. Big thank you to Aura for sponsoring the video. Now back to the video. The first most obvious reason is just that as games grew more complex, teams got bigger. Harder to fit a team of 20 on a video game box, let alone a team of goddamn 500. I mean, I guess you could, but brother, that's a lot of people in black t-shirts and black hoodies and dark blue denim jeans. But big video games, I keep trying to make it a thing that we call AAA games big video game, like Big Pharma. The big video game is more broadly collaborative in production by necessity. Unlike film, where one person actually can dictate the tone of every single scene simply by saying faster and more intense, game development is just hugely multidisciplinary. It's hard to preserve a single voice when you are wrangling 300 people across multiple disciplines. And outside of the, of course, many games that are still made by small teams, which by the way, hi, I'm currently co-directing a game called Layers Deep, which is being made by a tiny team of only 3 people. Go wishlist the game on Steam. Unless you're in the pocket of big video game. But yeah, it's difficult for any one developer to take credit for any one outcome because things are just so collaborative. I've done stuff in my work in video games that I couldn't even remember. Like if you were to be like, did you write this particular line of dialogue? I'd have to be like, maybe. I don't know at this point. Who's to say? Which is also part of why I can often feel like big video game doesn't have anything to say. How do you get 300 people working on totally different facets of something, often without even needing to talk to each other? They sometimes like don't even need to know each other's names because their disciplines are just so distinct to present a strong opinion. It is, again, by necessity, specifically talking about big video game, just gonna end up getting watered down somewhere. I think the interactivity of video games also contributes to this issue. Movies offer a certain person's perspective for you to absorb. You have no input. You are just shown somebody's work and you can take it or you can reject it. There is an inherent authorship in that person's presentation though. Most games are shaped by the player's decision making. I can name my horse in Red Dead Redemption 2 Seaman Biscuit if I really want to. And that emotional decision that I made is going to have a tremendous and probably life-changingly profound impact on what I take away from that particular story. But yeah, there are exceptions to the level of authorship in games too, which is why people know names like Hideo Kojima and Neil Druckmann. These are people who are usually presenting you with a point of view, even alongside the player-shaped decision-making that happens during the gameplay moments. The biggest reason publishers moved away from faces, though, is just boring old corporate brand risk. The sort of rockstar era of game development, which also included people like Cliff Bleszinski and maybe even Peter Molyneux, who came after the point that devs' faces were on boxes, but still in an era where devs were heavily marketed, only existed in a really, really small window of time where games had become very mainstream and very profitable, but PR teams had not yet fully caught up to that. The more corporate that gaming has become, the more publishers want to sell IPs and not personalities. Obviously, if a dev says something controversial or leaves mid-franchise, that's a reputational and stock market risk. Film doesn't have that problem because a director is effectively a freelancer, so they're not tied to the company and thus not really tied to their stocks most of the time. In gaming, they're usually tied to a studio, so the industry wiped away the faces and replaced them with logos. Yay. But Kojima ignored all of that. Born August 24th, 1963. We have the same birthday, by the way. Not the 1963 part, the August 24th part. He was born in Tokyo and was the youngest of 3 children. Okay, I probably don't need to go quite that detailed. He spent a whole lot of his youth watching film and TV and apparently started making movies in high school with his friend's Super 8 camera. He allegedly charged other students 50 yen to see those films, which is an absolute Chad move. He eventually went to university to study economics, but continued writing fiction at the same time, hoping that somehow, eventually, maybe someone would see his writing and ask him to direct a film, which is exactly my plan too. I can't believe it hasn't worked yet. That's crazy. But somewhere in the same era, the Nintendo Famicom came out and caught his eye, and so he thought about working in the games industry instead of the film industry. In 1986, Kojima applied for a job at Japanese game developer Konami because it was the only game developer listed on the Japanese stock exchange. Again, Chad moves. Iconic. What could go wrong? His first game was a racing platform game called Penguin Adventure, available on the MSX. And there are so many parts of the story that I love, by the way. Like, I love that he went to school for economics originally and then made his way as a storyteller anyway. I love that he started out making a Penguin game. Like, Christopher Nolan wishes his first movie could have been Happy Feet. Anyway, from there, he started to design a game called Lost World. Like, it's literally spelled W-A-R-L-D. But it got cancelled because it was too complicated for the MSX. From there, Kojima was asked to take over a project called Metal Gear, which you may have heard of. So obviously, just making the distinction that that is Metal Gear and not Metal Gear Solid. Two different things. But due to hardware limitations, again, Kojima pivoted the game to focus on a prisoner escaping, different to its original, more action-oriented design. It ended up becoming a stealth game. It was directly inspired by the 1950s book The Great Escape, which, if you didn't know, was written by an Australian named Paul Brickhill, and in very heavy context, is an insider's perspective of a mass escape from a Nazi prisoner of war camp that took place in March 1944. Kojima's second game is much less political, lol JK. It was called Snatcher, and is described as a cyberpunk graphic adventure game featuring humanoid robots that snatch people inside of a city and then replace them, with a number of very, like, Blade Runner-y themes, clearly. It uncovers a Soviet Union experiment that started during the Cold War, where the Snatchers were designed to kill and replace world leaders, apparently.
June 6, 1996. A mysterious explosion destroys the Chernobyl research facility near Moscow. Lucifer Alpha, a powerful biological weapon under secret development there, is released into the atmosphere, creating a deadly biohazard.
The game was considered to be particularly cinematic at the time, born of Kojima's persistent interest in being a filmmaker, obviously now translated directly into game development, which is something he's very much kept up. Kojima and his character designer actually went out of their way to treat the project like making a film or an anime series rather than making a video game. From there, we get Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, and Police Snorts, and then Kojima's big break, the actual Metal Gear Solid, a highly cinematic game about censorship, flaws in democracy, manipulation, and the military-industrial complex. Thank God he kept politics out of my video games. With Metal Gear Solid 2, his name's officially on the box art. A Hideo Kojima game is born. After continuing to work on a series of successful games, in 2011, Kojima was promoted to Executive Vice President and Corporate Officer of Konami. In 2012, Kojima mentioned excitement about potentially using the new Fox engine to make a Silent Hill game. He said, "Silent Hill is in a closed room setting and doesn't require full action so that we can focus on the graphic quality. Enemies featured in the game do not have to be consistent or move fast. Well, just like me at the gym. It only requires scariness by graphics and presentation," he continued. As being a creator making action games in an open world setting, such a type of game is very enviously attractive. If only someone could create this on the Fox engine. And so, getting the hint, eventually, Konami asked him to make one, a Silent Hill game. In August of 2014, a demo called PT was notoriously released on the PlayStation Store and acted as the announcement for a brand new game in the Silent Hill franchise called Silent Hills. I still maintain that PT is one of the best horror games ever made, even though people will argue that it's just a playable teaser or a demo. I don't care. It's just so good. I actually have my PS4. Pretty much the only reason that I've kept it, it's sitting right there right now, is for PT, and I will never get rid of it. You can pry that thing out of my cold dead hands. But yes, Silent Hills was supposed to be directed by Hideo Kojima in collaboration with Guillermo del Toro. At the same time, he was working on Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, and then suddenly, Konami removes his name from their website. Out of nowhere. Konami announces the cancellation of the Kojima Station broadcast, which was a video podcast series with Kojima and other developers from The Phantom Pain, where they would every week, I guess, talk about facets of game development. And at the time that they canceled it, it was scheduled to go live the following day. The day after that, they released a statement saying they've removed his name from marketing materials as part of their rebranding effort to put the name Konami front and center. Konami then takes PT down from the PlayStation Store and officially cancels Silent Hills. Konami apologizes at some point during this, says they're focused on mobile-first future for their games. They take Kojima's name off the Metal Gear 5 Solid box art. They reportedly did not even let Kojima have a farewell party when he left the company. We still don't know exactly why the relationship between Konami and Kojima fell apart. And there's way more detail that I could give on this particular thing, but I'm going to opt not to because it's not the point of this video. I gave you the cliff notes, but it does seem like it's probably a combination of creative differences budget issues and Konami moving to focus on the mobile game market like they said. But what did happen here is, in very dramatic terms, akin to like martyrdom. Konami effectively killed Kojima. They scrapped his project, removed him from the website, blocked a goddamn farewell party, and to the outside world, regardless of the actual truth about their breakup, again, we still don't really know all the details. It just looks like a single lone developer was ostracized and disrespected by the company that they had made so successful and so iconic. And thus, Hideo Kojima went from fairly well-known game director to like cult hero game director. He became a mistreated visionary. It's very romantic. From there, Kojima goes on to found his own game studio, Kojima Productions, which is named after the team of people that he already had together within Konami, and actually includes a lot of those people who left with him. They have since gone on to create, of course, Death Stranding, the first Strand-type game, which is all about human connection and Norman Reedus peeing in the wilderness. Nothing could have connected us better. They, of course, just released Death Stranding 2, and both of these games are very specifically marketed in Hideo Kojima ways. Not only do they build off of his previously established themes like anti-war, censorship, cinematic narratives, politics, they also market themselves front and center, of course, as Hideo Kojima games, in the same way that films do with their respective directors. Even if it feels maybe a little disingenuous where games are concerned, don't shoot me, Jeff Keighley, put the gun down, Jeff. While his DNA is obviously explicitly there, like clearly there, it is worth noting that Kojima is not the sole writer nor the sole producer of Death Stranding 2, despite being listed as the name on the front of at the start of the game next to those titles. There are more names in the end credits next to those disciplines, where most other studios have leaned away from strongly crediting one person in favor of the corporate-friendly team or studio. Kojima has consistently leaned into it. Konami maybe even almost managed to take that away from him, honestly. And maybe that was a big part of their falling out. I do think the weirdness of his latest two games, they are weird, let's be real, comes from the Hideo Kojima name working on the dev teams internally too, which I'm actually very happy about. Like, teams at most studios would push back on making a game where Norman Reedus with a backpack acts as an Uber Eats delivery driver, but for post-apocalyptic loneliness in a version of America that's full of ghost goo, and is also at perpetual risk of sudden nuke when a ghost baby and pre-ghost body, otherwise known as corpse, collide. Also, there's time-traveling rain. And people name things like Die Hard Men, who have a hard time dying. You know what I mean? But if you're going to work at Kojima Productions, I guess you probably just go with it. You're like, yeah, dude, I mean, it's your thing, man. Whatever you fucking want. So we get, like, weird little games. It's great. Kojima was recently reported to have said that he changed Death Stranding 2 halfway through development because the playtesting results were too good, and he did not want his work to be mainstream. That quote is actually what prompted me to want to make this video, really, because I think people took that to mean something much quirkier than what I think it actually means. I believe he was being 100% genuine in saying this and completely literal. He's someone who actively wants to push boundaries. He is someone who wants to be divisive, someone who wants to have something to say in order to have an identity, more so than a brand. It's not like a pseudo-intellectual, like, oh, the game was too good. It's more just that if everybody receives something positively, it can kind of be an indication that you didn't do anything particularly challenging, which is kind of something that I spoke about in my last video as well. There's also this increasing adoption that Kojima has of Hollywood talent, obviously including very controversially replacing the voice of Solid Snake and Naked Snake, David Hayter, with 24 actor Kiefer Sutherland. He's only increasingly built off of that recently, casting more and more and more well-known Hollywood actors in his games, regularly participating in what is akin to celebrity culture. He posts pictures with famous actors and actresses and scans them to include as part of his human Pokédex, we think. His social media is basically just dedicated to his commentary on movies, books, art. He regularly appears as the final boss of highly viewed events like the Game Awards, where he has effectively become a meme because Jeff Keighley just loves him just so damn much.
He is such a principled person that eventually word came back to me that Hideo just said, Jeff, I can't have that blood on my hands. He had to move on. And today, Hideo is rebuilding his life in his studio with our support. And like Snake said in MGS, Hideo knows that a strong man doesn't need to read his future, he makes his own.
Part of this is basically just how did Kojima become Kojima? It's because he acts like a public figure and not a usual game developer, and thus is just perceived as such. All of this really to say, I think Hideo Kojima's journey as a video game developer is an incredibly unique one. There's nobody like him. There may never be anybody like him again. There might not even be anybody who's trying to be like him. This is basically like the story of a kid who watched movies every night with his parents, and how he went from charging his high school friends to watch his homemade films to studying economics in university to becoming arguably the most famous game developer alive. And now he's like uniquely seen as a visionary in an industry that's young enough to have the people who literally pioneered entire genres still be alive and working today. And that's of course not to say that we know that much about him as a person. Like, I feel the need to say that. In interviews, he still largely just talks about video games or movies or music or art or whatever. We don't know that much about Kojima's actual character outside of some obvious quirks. He could be a total monster for all we know. But if he is, he's a monster with incredibly strong directional branding, and in an industry that largely tries to squash that. Konami genuinely almost seemingly tried to take that away from him and did not succeed, and now nobody really can. We will have Hideo Kojima games forever. And yeah, like one half of this, again, it's just really interesting. Second half, I don't know, man. I'm really glad to have somebody who has free creative license to just make fucking weird games. Even if Hideo Kojima never made a game ever again, I would always watch the various short films, bizarre short films that are basically the Death Stranding trailers. Like, no one else in the industry with that budget gets away with making stuff like that. And I don't know if we'll ever see it again in the big video game space. It seems like it's something really only indies can do, and really only because indies have that creative freedom to like control their brands however they would like to, for better or for worse. I don't know. Hope you found this video interesting. See you guys next time.